Good morning, everybody. We have a lot to talk about during this extreme weather briefing, including the tropics that are really heating up right now. We have disturbance 99L out there in the Caribbean that some of the models are showing could become a very substantial hurricane into the Gulf of Mexico, and really anywhere from Central America all the way up to the coastline of Mississippi. Need to keep an eye on this hurricane. Many of these models show this becoming a monster in the Gulf of Mexico. That includes the GFS, the HWRF. The European model solutions show this northwestward steering movement as well along the western periphery of that high that's eventually going to anchor over the Gulf of Mexico and provide a very favorable environment for intensification as this hurricane heads toward the northwest. Out here we have 98 and 97L. These are not going to be a problem. This one, the northern one, though, could become a pretty strong tropical cyclone as well as it curls off to the northeast harmlessly out to sea. And we have slight risks ahead across the northern high plains, starting with a marginal risk today across the high plains, eastern Colorado into the Nebraska panhandle. Eastern Wyoming could also see some severe weather as well. So that is the summary map there. We are going to be monitoring all of this. We might even storm chase tomorrow across eastern Wyoming into the Nebraska panhandle. But right now we have got to keep a very close eye here on 99L. And let me show you really quickly the loop here. This is a 6E GFS, and actually these last four runs of the GFS have taken 99L into the western Gulf of Mexico. There you can see the latest GFS run. This is just the operational GFS, so we're going to be breaking down the GFS ensemble as well to see the certainty of this track. And I can tell you right now that the certainty of this track is pretty low because there is a big spread in the evolution of 99L, ranging from dissipation over Central America, inland near Nicaragua, to passing over the northern tip of the Yucatan and then re-intensifying big time in the central Gulf of Mexico. And even the HWRF takes it over the western tip of Cuba, bringing it into southeastern Louisiana. So really anywhere from the central Gulf Coast, Mississippi, Alabama, west through Louisiana, Texas coastline, need to keep a very, very close eye on this on 99L. And let me show you really quickly just for fun. You never want to be honed in on any of these individual models, but here is the HWRF taking the further north track over the western tip of Cuba, and watch this thing organize. This model is available on the tropicaltidbits.com website, a great website for visualization of these storms, and it looks like this thing is stopping a little bit short. Having trouble finding that center there, but a little bit later on in that forecast loop, it does show that intense tropical cyclone in the western Gulf of Mexico, making landfall relatively close to southeastern Louisiana, which is definitely a scary situation considering what happened last year in Louisiana with all those big-time impacts out there. This is the GFS ensemble, also from tropicaltidbits.com, and you can see those different members. The red tracks, that shows a stronger system in the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see that these further east tracks that are able to avoid the tip of the Yucatan and take advantage of these very warm waters that are located over the northwestern Gulf of Mexico in excess of 30 degrees Celsius. You can see those members intensify this into a potentially major hurricane from the central Texas coastline through Louisiana and really anywhere, Alabama, Mississippi, throughout the central Gulf Coast, all the way down through Mexico, even Central America. Nicaragua needs to keep a very close eye on this as well. Could be a big-time rainmaker if this does take that western track and then is able to dissipate over the mountains there of Central America. You can also see a couple of these members over the southern Gulf of Mexico. These aren't as strong. They dissipate over the Yucatan, and then they pass over those modified Gulf of Mexico temperatures a little bit cooler after the passage of Grace there, intensifying into a major hurricane, making landfall along the Emerald Coast of Mexico there. These hurricanes, when they pass over the ocean waters, can cause upwelling, and basically they'll bring up those cooler water temperatures up from the lower, deeper oceanic locations, and that upwelling brings that cooler water temperature up to the surface, and that's exactly what has happened over the southern Gulf of Mexico. But these members that are further right, the ones near the tip of the Yucatan, the H-WRF is actually the furthest right, bringing it over the western tip of Cuba, even pretty close to the Isle of Youth, and then over southeastern Louisiana. But that's just the one model. That's a very useful small-scale model to kind of see how the structural evolution of the tropical cyclone will evolve, and how quickly it'll organize, and will it have a tilted structure or pretty vertically oriented. This one is going to have very favorable wind shear conditions. There is a tropical cyclone that could intensify in the eastern tropical Pacific out here on the west side of Mexico, and that system could bring some outflow, which could cause a little bit of wind shear for these southern tracts out here. But that seems like really the only potential weakness for the system other than land interaction. And overall, the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico has very light wind shear, very favorable environment for intensification into a major hurricane. And central Gulf Coast through Mexico, through the Yucatan, needs to keep a very close eye on this potential monster tropical cyclone that currently is 99L. But most of the models are showing quite rapid intensification up there into the Gulf of Mexico. And here are the latest intensity models. This is the 12Z model runs, hot off the press here. A couple of those runs, the furthest right, that includes the H-WRF, intensifies this thing into a major hurricane, but that takes the furthest right track. That means that it's going to avoid the Yucatan largely, passing over that western tip of Cuba, staying out of those upwelled sea surface temperatures that are slightly modified over the southern Gulf of Mexico, keeps it over that 30 degrees Celsius temperatures and warmer, and then allows that thing to intensify. So I definitely have a bad feeling about this system 99L here. That looks like it could become a pretty substantial hurricane. Here you can see those Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperatures right now. Basically anything in the yellow out here is 30 degrees Celsius and warmer, and that benchmark, the 28 degrees Celsius and warmer, is really all it takes to allow a tropical cyclone to intensify without bound. You need those sea surface temperatures to be 80 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. And here you can see over the southern Gulf of Mexico some of those modified sea surface temperatures. So we had SSTs that were greater than 30 degrees Celsius over the Bay of Campeche ahead of Grace. That allowed Grace to intensify into a major hurricane before making landfall there on the Emerald Coast. And the track of Grace here over this area has caused a modification of those sea surface temperatures. So they're not as hot as they were before. But they still are greater than that 28 degrees Celsius. You can see some pockets of light blue in there that show those SSTs around 28 degrees Celsius. But anywhere north of that track, across the northwestern central Gulf of Mexico, you can see all those yellows and even the orange up here off the coast of Louisiana. Those are big time hot temperatures. Those are even approaching 32 degrees Celsius up there. So any hurricane that's able to track toward the central Gulf of Mexico, that does include Louisiana, those shallow waters up there have just been cooking in the sunlight there off the south coast of Louisiana, increasing to above 32 degrees Celsius. So if this hurricane is able to track in this direction, that's going to create big time problems. And I know that's not good news for those locations that were ravaged by Hurricane Delta, Hurricane Laura, and Hurricane Zeta out there across the southern coast of Louisiana. Still a lot of recovery to do out there, especially in the Lake Charles area from Hurricane Laura. But there's still a lot of uncertainty with these forecast tracks, anywhere from dissipating over Central America to a major hurricane pretty close to the central Gulf of Mexico. Either way, though, I'm going to be chasing this system. I am activating full-blown chase mode for this system. And now I want to show you really quickly the wind shear forecast, looking out with time as well here. We're going to pivot on over to the pivotal, or the COD forecast, 200 millibar winds, 250 millibar winds. This is the upper troposphere up here. And make sure this thing is still looping. There we go. Just got to use the mouse. So notice that high pressure there that is to the northeast of Cuba. Well, that's an upper level low. So let's forecast with time just a little bit, and you're going to see that high pressure there expand over to the southwest, over the development zone there of the Caribbean. You can definitely see that high pressure, see the northerlies there on the east side of that high pressure area. And this is creating favorable conditions over the Caribbean for organization there. that upper level low tends to dissipate, and that allows that high pressure to overspread across the Caribbean. There you can see it here at about 45 hours. There you can see that high pressure aloft, anchored over the Caribbean, enclosed by the Yucatan there, Cuba as well, extending to the northeast of Cuba, basically near the Bermuda Triangle here. And this high is going to pivot over the Gulf of Mexico. You can also see a lot of these relatively weak winds. You're not really seeing that upper level low shears out, lifts off to the northeast, south of Florida, and you're really seeing a lot of these weak upper level winds. You want high pressure aloft, relatively weak upper tropospheric winds for these hurricanes to intensify and to really create a very efficient vertically aligned heat engine that takes the heat from the ocean surface and then dissipates it in the upper troposphere. These tropical cyclones are incredibly useful for heat transport from the tropics to the middle latitudes and from the ocean surface up to aloft in the troposphere. And look at that high pressure there pivot to being around the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to create a very favorable situation for the storm to intensify after it passes over the Yucatan. You can see this high pressure just dominating the Gulf Coast and the southern U.S. You can see those troughs, though, over the northern U.S. Those are going to create severe weather events this weekend through next week. There is a slight risk across the northern plains. That's this system that you can see right there. Cruising across the northern plains. That's going to create severe weather tomorrow. It appears across eastern Montana, the high plains, into western Dakotas, including the Deadwood area there. So you can still see an active polar front jet stream across the northern U.S. and the Canadian prairies, creating a pretty active severe weather season from the northern plains through the Midwest. We're going to have to decide whether to chase those severe weather setups or to stay focused on 99L here. There you can see it making landfall, southern Louisiana, there about 140, 150 hours. So early next week, Monday, possible landfall, maybe a Sunday, Monday type landfall out there in the central Gulf Coast. So that's why I'm thinking I might have to position for that hurricane landfall in the central Gulf Coast. And then look at the northern plains get active once again there after that. So after that landfall, I could pivot toward the Dakotas and chase that northern stream up there. Look at that jet stream aloft. Let me recenter this a little bit more. But the reason I'm showing this upper tropospheric map is more to show how favorable the conditions are for intensification over the Gulf of Mexico into the early next week. Watch that upper level low weaken there over Florida, and then it's replaced by that high pressure zone that expands over the Gulf of Mexico. Leads to relatively weak difluent conditions aloft. Should easily be able to allow for this system to intensify over the bathwater there of the Gulf of Mexico in excess of 30 degrees Celsius, especially if it takes that northern track. Some of the models, the hurricane models especially, will take 99L over Central America and then dissipate it over the mountains of Nicaragua and Honduras there. And then that would be the weaker solution. But the further north that this thing goes, over the northern tip of the Yucatan or that western tip of Cuba, if it passes through the gap there, then it'll head into the Gulf of Mexico and could potentially become a major hurricane. I've got 2 subsonic sensors to measure microbarometer data of mesovortices inside the eye. I'm hoping to get the surgeonators ready to go in time. Mark is coming down the home stretch with the Dominator weather stations as well. So it is very possible that this initial hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico could be the debut hurricane that I'm able to chase with the Dominator weather station on the roof. I'm planning on meeting up with Sasha and Critter tomorrow down in Denver to mount the roof rack on top of the Dominator 4 so I can prep it for the weather station. Also mount the RM Young anemometer on the roof as well. I've got some new equipment from WeatherTech, including a stone protector that I'm going to mount on the front end of the vehicle to try to protect the air conditioning filter. And of course I have some more Flex Seal liquid as well to apply to Dominator 4. And I'm hoping to do all that tomorrow. But if the high plains look like there's a decent chance of a tornado, then I may have to chase that. And look at all that. This shows you that trough there over Alberta. A lot of that strong flow downstream over Montana. A little bit of a ribbon of stronger flow over eastern and northeastern Wyoming as well, but looking at the shape of this trough, it looks like western North Dakota, eastern Montana, maybe northwestern South Dakota look like the place to target for tomorrow with that slight risk. Right now, it has no tornado probabilities due to the higher cloud bases, but I do think that there's going to be a 2% tornado risk introduced from eastern Montana into western North Dakota for that system trucking along, and then you can see the next system too could bring some high plains insanity there for next week. Looks like Denver, western Nebraska, northeastern Colorado, eastern Wyoming there during that period. Looks like the early portion of next week, that'll bring some severe weather. And that trough could help to weaken that high a little bit to turn this hurricane off more to the north, northwestern steering current as that high is anchored over the Gulf of Mexico. But look at that jet start to head south. That's setting the stage for a potentially active fall season. This is a consolidated jet stream right here. So notice how those Rossby waves are coming one after another. Those short wave troughs, some longer wave troughs out there even. But you can see that this is a nice consolidated jet stream setting the stage for an active fall season for severe weather across the central and northern U.S. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that as well. But definitely does look like a hurricane to watch coming up here. Looking at the summary map, once again, we have these three disturbances out there. 97 and 98L are not going to be a problem except for shipping out there. Those are the eastern disturbances. But 99L looks like it could very easily become a big problem in the Gulf of Mexico, potentially turning off to the north toward Louisiana and the Texas coastline, and really anywhere from the Mississippi, Alabama coastline all the way through northern Mexico. Need to keep a very close eye on this system up there. So now I want to take a look at the severe weather setup for today. Today, actually, there is a marginal risk in effect today as well. And there is a slight risk in effect tomorrow. The marginal risk today does even include eastern Colorado back toward the Denver area. So I'm going to take a look really quick at the mesoanalysis here, the RAP forecast. Let's just take a look at the high plains and see if we're going to get some decent instability here across eastern Colorado. You can see these northerly winds here indicating a post-frontal environment. Those winds will back over an easterly direction and then transport this moisture located across eastern Colorado back west toward closer to the Front Range. And then you get some decent instability, 1 to 2,000 Cape there, streaming across the high plains of Colorado, getting all the way banked up against the foothills there. You can see these easterly winds going all the way up into the foothills to the west of Denver, transporting that moisture northward there. Not as much of the way of upper level winds as we're going to see during the day tomorrow, at least from Wyoming north. But not bad in terms of the effective helicities there, 100 plus, basically 50 to 100, but basically 5 to 10 knot storm motions, very slow storm motions here. It is possible that if that moisture is able to reach up high enough into the foothills, that we could get a couple of storms anchored in those foothills, and if those are able to anchor over some of those wildfire burn scars, like the Cameron Peak fire burn scar up there, maybe even the Mullen fire up into eastern Wyoming, that could create some problems. But here you can see this post-frontal environment across northeastern Colorado, these northerly winds out here across the high plains of Colorado. Those are going to shift back to an easterly direction, and that should create about 30 knots of bulk shear. Borderline conditions for supercell storms out here, but you could get some slow-moving easterly storm motions at about 10 knots. But you got a 55 dew point here in Denver this morning. Pretty moist across the Colorado foothills and down into the adjacent high plains. You even got some low to mid 60s out here further east across southwestern Nebraska and northwestern Kansas. So that certainly could set the stage for severe weather this afternoon. I may have to activate chase mode here in Denver as well. Come on. Come on, Pivotal. Hopefully I still have internet here. Yep, I do still have internet. Oh boy, looks like we might have crashed. So we'll head over to COD. Great model site as well. We also have a storm chasing program at COD, which is pretty awesome. This is the WRAP model here for eastern Colorado. Tends to develop some convective precipitation up there, right over that Mullen, or right over the Cameron Peak Fire burn scar to the west of Fort Collins. So I'm going to have to keep a pretty close eye on that as well. Looking at your dew points, decent initialization here by the WRAP. If anything, it's underdoing, though, the forecast across Denver and the dryness there to the south of the, along and south of the Palmer Divide. But really, you've got mid-50s dew points all the way up to Denver already this morning, according to that surface map. It does accurately depict, though, the moisture across the northeastern corner of Colorado here. So let's watch this moisture get transported up the terrain back west toward Denver. And by late morning, the WRAP is showing dew points to be pushing 60 out there in Denver, and that's going to set the stage for some severe weather. And I do think there is some flash flood potential over the Cameron Peak Fire burn scar along the Poudre Canyon there. Keep an eye on the Poudre to the west of Fort Collins there in northeastern Colorado, and those dew points there hold near 60. And temperatures are going to be a little bit lower today across Denver as well in this post-frontal environment. Should keep those cloud bases down a little bit. And then as we go the overnight hours, look at this moisture advection up into the terrain overnight tonight. Could be feeding any storms that are able to anchor on that terrain. And that includes the Cameron Peak Fire burn scar. Nice moisture advection overnight tonight. It's going to be a moist night across Denver, adjacent foothills, southeastern Wyoming as well. And this moisture transport is out ahead of that trough that's going to be so interesting tomorrow. Looking at the trough, it does look like most of the favorable conditions are going to be across the northern plains. So let's take a look here. Tomorrow, where I do think today is going to be interesting, though. Some isolated severe weather. I might even upgrade to a slight risk across eastern Colorado later on. But now we're going to look at the day on Thursday. Watch this moisture transport up into the high plains here of Montana. This is at 18Z on Thursday. You can see that nice ribbon of instability up through the Billings area, all the way up into southern Saskatchewan, southwestern Saskatchewan there. And you can see the hatch area shows you where there's convective inhibition still in place there at about midday, southeastern Montana. But you start to get an erosion of that cap, central Montana into southwestern Saskatchewan there. That's probably where initiation is going to happen. Pretty stout cap, though, into northeastern Wyoming as well, all the way. For basically, Wyoming south has a pretty stout cap. Nebraska Panhandle, it looks like that cap breaks. Starts to break in Billings, too, at about 0Z. So I can see some storms firing off the mountains there in Billings a little bit late. But it does look like a lot of capping. Big day possibly, though, tomorrow across southwestern Saskatchewan. You can see a little bit of a warm front right there. I know Sean Schofer got a tornado out there in Saskatchewan the other day. There was also a tornado to the north of Melville, Saskatchewan yesterday that we were keeping a close eye on. And then look at Friday there across southern Minnesota. The system heads off to the east, and then that same location, southern Minnesota into northeastern Iowa. Another severe weather event possible on Friday. So I could easily chase Thursday and Friday, eastern Montana, then southern Minnesota on Friday. Or I got to wait for 99L, which could be the big tropical season here across eastern Texas into the central Gulf Coast. I definitely need to keep a very close eye on that as well. Looks like on Saturday, some big cape develops over southern Minnesota into western Wisconsin with that energized northern branch that we were looking at. Just for the hell of it, let's look at the HRRR here and see if we do get initiation of storms across today. Probably overmixes the dew points once again with that dry bias. And look at the HRRR. It doesn't even fire a single storm out there through 23Z at least. Come on. Of course. Okay, we're looking at the 12ZH here. See if it initiates storms across northeastern Colorado. It does. Look at that. Right at 0Z, the HRRR fires one right off the Palmer Divide there. Denver. That's going to be my chase today, folks. Look at that thing. HRRR right there. Probably has a dry bias too, but and look at that, how after dark with that moisture advection into the foothills, it fires up storms again around the Poudre Canyon as well. So I think there's going to be flash flood potential along the Poudre to the west of Fort Collins today. I might also position myself to get that. I do think there is decent severe weather potential near the Denver area. Look at that storm that fires just off the Palmer Divide out near the Denver International Airport. Might even need a slight risk out there. Definitely some potential for flooding as those easterlies advect those 60-plus dew points right up into the foothills. So if a storm can anchor over that burn scar there over the Poudre Canyon, I could see another big debris flow coming down the Poudre as well during the day today. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that additionally. But I think that we could see an upgrade to slight risk across that area. Let's take a look at tomorrow. See that lone supercell that develops there in central Montana during the day tomorrow. It doesn't fire anything off the terrain there in Billings. You do get kind of some messy modes there across eastern Wyoming into the Black Hills. Maybe some isolated severe weather. Tomorrow looks like a central Montana or bust type of a play, but you do get that right mover right up there in the northwestern part of the screen. See that supercell storm moving off to the east-southeast there in central Montana. I have to keep a close eye on that. It goes all the way through the Glendive area, all the way eventually into western North Dakota there as well. Let's take a look at the low-level jet for tomorrow. Okay, whatever. So that could also be interesting. So we've got severe weather today near the Denver area. Maybe flash flood threat over the Cameron Peak Fire burn scar to the west of Fort Collins and the Poudre Canyon. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. I will go live if need be, if that happens. I do need to get a new drone as well since I lost my drone during that last intercept there. That's always a disappointing deal. But remember, anywhere from Mississippi all the way through the Texas coastline, Mexico as well, needs to keep an eye on 99L. Got a bad feeling about this one. It's probably going to be a big-time hurricane in there in the Gulf of Mexico. But I'll be breaking it down here live for you folks. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this weather report this morning. Very important weather briefing, considering that 99L could cause so many problems for the central Gulf Coast. And high plains severe weather as well. We got to keep an eye on with that slight risk tomorrow and today near the Denver area. Potential for a debris flow, though, down that Cameron Peak Fire burn scar. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in this morning. Hope you enjoy my weather reports. Never stop chasing.